I first started getting into Buddhism around the age of 15 when I was going through a breakup and starting to take spirituality into consideration just because the way I was living my life egoically, just being dragged around by my feelings and emotions all the time. It didn't feel right for me. So I started looking into Buddhism, and it at first it was just the typical meditate, be calm, be here and now, and just the typical first things you begin to learn about Buddhism. And then I kind of set it aside, and what really got the ball rolling was when I started experimenting with psychedelics. It began turning up those things that I had learned in Buddhism, in the integration portions of my psychedelic experiences, where I was realizing that these states were kind of modulating the best way to navigate through those experiences are with a sort of Buddhist clarity. And it turned me on to the idea of what Buddhism actually was about. So I really started looking into it, and this was actually very recent. I started looking into it maybe half a year ago, and I started getting these new impressions of what it meant. And what it meant was, it was this sort. It wasn't a religion. It wasn't about worship. It wasn't about blind faith. They actually despised of blind faith and saw it as a sort of just lack of understanding. Ignorance is what they call it. But what I started to realize was that Buddhism was a method, an individual method, to cease suffering, which is rooted in desire and attachment. And I thought to myself, is it really easy as that? Is it really easy as that to say what Buddhism is in one sentence like that? It's a method to stop suffering. And I started looking into it more and reflecting on it more. And I was realizing that it does work. Buddhism does work when you understand its teachings fully. Like, for example, when you get in a rough situation with somebody, like an argument or a fight or whatever, you feel these spiking emotions and feelings to kind of prompt your actions and narrate through the experience you're in that situation. But Buddhism encourages you to kind of remain blank in a state of awareness and observance of both these impressions, the ones that you think are in your body in trying to tell you what to do, and the ones that the person you are arguing with is presenting. You kind of just watch these feelings. It just doesn't mean stare at them, but it may mean not address what they're doing. It may not even require you to interact with them. And if it does, a sort of mindless, compassionate, neutral response is seemingly the best outcome in those situations where you kind of just go with the flow. In that's kind of a Zen sense where if they're mad, they're mad. You understand that they're mad. That's it. And it doesn't require your agreement with it or not. And another thing I want to talk about is meditation. Meditation is also similar to this arguing idea, where when you sit down out of nowhere, just sit down and begin to focus on the feeling and the sense of your breath going in your nose, usually right here at the tip of your nose, and down your throat, and then out, and begin to really heavily focus on that. And you'll find out very quickly that there are just these kind of intrusive thoughts that just are taking place and kind of grabbing your point of attention constantly. You will interact with the thought streams that are going on, rather than simply just focusing on your breath. You are being bombarded with these ideas and memories and scenarios, and it's all just pulling you away from this one thing you were trying to do. And it's a good example of how the egoic mind works, of how it can't just stop. It can't just focus and observe itself. It needs to be doing something. That's why we get bored. That's why it's hard to meditate. And it's why it's good to try meditating and embrace boredom, because these are opportunities for you to self-reflect on why you can't focus on the breath, or why you can't stand not doing something. In my opinion, I feel like the idea of boredom is that you feel like you're not doing anything, but you in fact are doing something. But what you identify as doing something is this sort of rowdy, rambunctious activity that takes place physically, and you got to move all about. But you only call it boredom when you're sitting going, damn, like, I don't got anything to do right now, you know. But you're doing something. You're thinking about how you don't have something to do. And it's in essence a waste of time. You can think about that if you want, but if anything, watch the boredom. Watch it rather than be bored. See the boredom and allow the boredom to be whatever it is, and it will burn out like a fire without wood, you know. It just kind of dies off on its own. And these are in essence the teachings I have began to understand from Buddhism. It's just kind of a daily system of understanding true, foundational, simple wisdom of just situations that take place, and how you respond to them, and how you respond to all things at all times in this sort of narration-like way. Well, Buddhism allows you to just let the narrator narrate, but instead you are watching the narrator do the narrator thing, you know. So that's really all I can think of in terms of just what it means to me, what I understand of Buddhism. I know the backstory. I know some of the deity type figures and images that they use in representation of actual life scenarios. And besides that, using Buddhism to navigate mindfully and consciously through psychedelic experiences is another good thing that I've come across, is that this blank point of just observance and allowance seems to work in the essence of, in the idea of understanding the psychedelic during its moments of presentation. So that's about all I got, and I hope you got something out of this. If any of you were watching this, hope it means something. Hope shed light on a situation or idea that you may have been thinking. But other than that, that's it for this first video. Thank you guys.